It was just another Tuesday morning at Mel's Diner, the kind of place where everybody knows your name and your usual order. The smell of fresh coffee and bacon filled the air, mixing with the sound of sizzling griddles and friendly chatter. Sunlight streamed through the large windows, casting a warm glow over the red vinyl booths and checkered floor. In the corner booth, the same spot he'd been sitting in for the past 15 years, was Walter Hayes. At 81 years old, Walter was a fixture at Mel's. Every Tuesday and Thursday morning, like clockwork, he'd shuffle in with his wooden cane, offer a warm smile to whoever was working, and settle into his favorite spot. The waitresses knew him well. Coffee, black, 2 eggs over easy, wheat toast and a side of bacon. No need to even ask anymore. Walter wasn't just any regular customer, though. He was a Korean War veteran, and if you looked closely, you could see the faded tattoo on his forearm, the one he got back in 1951. His hands were weathered and marked with age spots, but they were steady as he lifted his coffee cup. Those same hands had once held rifles and helped wounded soldiers. They'd signed letters home to his young wife. They'd rebuilt his life after the war ended. This particular morning, Walter was reading the local newspaper, his reading glasses perched on the end of his nose. He'd circle the obituaries first, a sad habit of getting old, he'd say. Too many friends to keep track of, too many goodbyes. But he was in good spirits today. The sun was shining, his arthritis wasn't acting up too bad, and his son had called last night just to check in. The bell above the diner door chimed, the cheerful sound that usually meant another friendly face walking in. But this time the energy in the room shifted. 3 young men entered, and you could feel the change immediately. They were loud, speaking over each other, laughing in that aggressive way that makes people uncomfortable. The kind of laugh that's meant to intimidate rather than express joy. The one in front was clearly the leader, tall, maybe late 20s, with tattoos crawling up his neck and arms. He wore a stained tank top despite the cool morning air, and his jeans hung low on his hips. His name was Derek, though nobody in the diner knew that yet. His 2 friends followed behind him like shadows, trying to match his swagger but not quite pulling it off. This place looks like it's stuck in the 1950s, Derek announced to no one in particular, his voice carrying across the entire diner. Several customers glanced up, then quickly looked back down at their plates. Nobody wanted trouble this early in the morning. The waitress, a kind woman named Betty who'd been working at Mel's for 23 years, approached them with menus and a professional smile. "Good morning, gentlemen. Sit anywhere you'd like." Derek looked her up and down in a way that made her skin crawl. "Gentlemen? You hear that, boys? She thinks we're gentlemen." His friends laughed on cue. "What if we want to stand? You got a problem with that, sweetheart?" Betty's smile tightened, but she kept her composure. Years of dealing with difficult customers had taught her patience. "No problem at all. Just let me know when you're ready to order." As she walked away, Derek made a comment under his breath that made his friends snicker. The morning regulars at the counter exchanged concerned glances. Old Tom, who'd been coming to Mel's since it opened in 1987, shook his head slightly. He'd seen trouble like this before. Derek and his crew finally settled into a booth near the middle of the diner, not bothering to look at the menus. They were too busy looking around, sizing up the place, making sure everyone knew they were there. One of them put his feet up on the opposite seat. Another one started scrolling through his phone with the volume turned up. Some rap song with explicit lyrics echoing through the usually peaceful space. Walter tried to focus on his newspaper, but it was getting difficult. The music was loud, and the young men's conversation was peppered with profanity. He'd been in enough tough situations in his life to recognize when someone was looking for conflict. These boys had that energy about them, like they were just waiting for someone to give them a reason. Betty returned to take their order, her notepad ready. Derek didn't even look at her. "Yeah, give me whatever. Eggs, I guess. And coffee. You guys got coffee in this dump?" "We certainly do," Betty replied, her voice still professional despite the insult. "How would you like your eggs?" "However." "I don't care." Derek waved his hand dismissively. "Just make it quick. We got places to be." As Betty walked away again, Derek suddenly stood up, stretching loudly. He wasn't watching where he was going, too busy talking to his friends about something. He backed right into Walter's table, causing the elderly man's coffee to slosh over the rim of the cup and spill onto the newspaper. Walter looked up from his ruined paper, coffee dripping onto his lap. He grabbed his napkin, carefully dabbing at the mess. "Excuse me, son. he said quietly, his voice polite but firm. "You might want to watch where you're going." Derek turned around slowly, as if he couldn't believe someone had just spoken to him. He looked down at the old man sitting there with his coffee-stained newspaper and wet pants. For a moment, nobody in the diner moved. It was like everyone was holding their breath, waiting to see what would happen next. "What did you just say to me, old man?" Derek's voice had an edge to it now, that dangerous tone that meant things were about to go wrong. Walter met his eyes calmly. 8 decades of life had taught him not to back down from bullies, but also not to escalate unnecessarily. "I said you might want to watch where you're going. You bumped my table and spilled my coffee. That's all." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Other customers started paying attention now, some subtly reaching for their phones. Betty stopped what she was doing behind the counter, her hand moving toward the phone. Mel himself, the owner, emerged from the kitchen, sensing trouble. Derek stepped closer to Walter's booth, his friends now standing behind him. "You got a problem, Grandpa? Maybe you're the one who needs to watch out. This is a public place. I can stand wherever I want." "Nobody said you couldn't," Walter replied, his military training evident in his composure. "I just asked you to be more careful. It's common courtesy." The word courtesy seemed to set something off in Derek. His face flushed red and his jaw clenched. This old man, sitting there calm as could be, wasn't showing him the fear or respect he thought he deserved. And that was something Derek couldn't tolerate. The peaceful Tuesday morning at Mel's Diner was about to become something nobody would ever forget. Derek stood there staring down at Walter with a look that could freeze water. His friends had moved closer now, forming a small semicircle around the booth. The whole diner had gone quiet. Even the sizzle from the kitchen seemed to have stopped. Everyone was watching, but nobody was moving. "Common courtesy?" Derek repeated, his voice dripping with mockery. "Did you really just lecture me about manners, old-timer? Do you know who you're talking to?" Walter carefully folded his coffee-stained newspaper and set it aside. His movements were slow, deliberate. He'd dealt with angry young men before, back in his day. The key was staying calm, not giving them the reaction they wanted. "I don't know who you are, son. And frankly, it doesn't matter. I just asked you to be more careful. That's all." "That's all?" Derek laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You hear this guy? He thinks he can tell me what to do." He leaned down, putting his hands on Walter's table, getting right in the old man's face. "Listen here, Grandpa. Maybe back in your day people respected their elders or whatever. But things are different now. You don't get to talk to me like that just because you're old." Walter could smell the cigarettes and energy drinks on Derek's breath. Up close, he could see the young man's pupils were dilated, his jaw working back and forth. He'd seen enough in his life to recognize someone who was looking for a fight, someone whose anger had nothing to do with spilled coffee. "I meant no disrespect," Walter said evenly. "I'm just trying to enjoy my breakfast in peace." "In peace?" Derek straightened up, throwing his arms wide. "You want peace? Then maybe you should have kept your mouth shut when I bumped your precious table. Ever think of that?" One of Derek's friends chimed in, emboldened by his leader's aggression. "Yeah, man. Nobody asked for your opinion." Betty had been watching from behind the counter, her heart pounding. She'd already pressed the panic button that alerted the local police, something Mel had installed after a robbery attempt 5 years ago. But she knew it would take at least 10 minutes for anyone to arrive. That was 10 minutes too long. She caught Mel's eye, and he gave her a small nod. He was already reaching for his phone. Old Tom at the counter slowly stood up. He was 73 himself, a retired construction worker with a bad back, but he wasn't about to sit there and watch a fellow veteran get harassed. "Hey now," he called out. "Why don't you boys just settle down?" The man apologized. "No need to make a big deal out of nothing." Derek's head snapped toward Tom. "Who asked you, old man? You want some of this too? Because I got plenty to go around." Tom's wife grabbed his arm, pulling him back down. "Don't," she whispered urgently. "Please, honey, don't." Derek turned back to Walter, his smile ugly and mean. "See that? Even your buddy knows better than to mess with me. So why don't you just sit there quietly, eat your eggs, and maybe I'll forget about your little attitude problem." Walter's hands were folded on the table now, those weathered, age-spotted hands that had seen so much life. They weren't shaking. His voice, when he spoke, was steady and clear. "Young man, I served my country for 3 years in Korea. I've been shot at, seen friends die, and lived through things you can't imagine. I'm not trying to fight you, but I'm also not afraid of you." The words hung in the air like smoke. For a moment, something flickered across Derek's face. Was it respect? Recognition? But it passed quickly, replaced by something darker. "Korea?" Derek laughed, a harsh barking sound. "What is that like 100 years ago? Who cares, old man? That was your choice. Nobody forced you to go play soldier. And it sure doesn't give you the right to talk down to me now." "I wasn't talking down to you," Walter said quietly. "I was simply asking you to be more considerate." "Considerate," Derek practically shouted the word. "You're still doing it, still acting like you're better than me." He was working himself up now, his face getting redder, his movements more agitated. His friends looked uncomfortable, like maybe things were going too far, but they weren't about to step in. A young couple in the booth next to Walter's quietly stood up, leaving money on their table and hurrying toward the door. They didn't want to be there when things got worse. And everyone could feel it, that electric tension in the air that meant something bad was about to happen. "All I wanted," Derek continued, his voice rising, "was to come in here and get some breakfast. But no, you had to start something. You had to run your mouth. So now you're going to learn a lesson about respect." Walter began to slide out of his booth, reaching for his cane. Maybe if he just walked away, this would all blow over. He'd been in enough fights in his life. He had nothing to prove anymore. "I'm just going to go," he said calmly. "I don't want any trouble." But Derek stepped in front of him, blocking his path. "Oh no, Grandpa, you don't get to walk away now. Not after disrespecting me in front of everyone." Betty called out from behind the counter, her voice shaking but firm. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. We don't tolerate harassment here." Derek glanced at her, then back at the diner full of people watching him. And that's when Walter saw it, the real problem. Derek wasn't just angry. He needed to prove something. He needed everyone in this diner to know that he was in charge, that he couldn't be challenged, that respect or fear was owed to him. "You want me to leave?" Derek said, his voice dangerous and quiet now. "Fine. I'll leave. But not before I teach this old fool some manners." Walter's military instincts kicked in. He could see the shift in Derek's body language, the way his weight moved to his right foot, the way his shoulder tensed. Something was coming. He tried to move back to put distance between them, but he was trapped between the booth and Derek's advancing form. "Derek, man, let's just go," one of his friends said nervously. "This ain't worth it." But Derek wasn't listening anymore. He was staring at Walter with pure rage in his eyes, all reason gone, replaced by the need to dominate, to win, to make this old man who dared to speak up pay for his words. "You should have just kept quiet," Derek said, and his hand came up fast. Walter saw it coming, but at 81, his reflexes weren't what they used to be. There was nothing he could do but brace himself for what happened next. And in that frozen moment, everyone in Mel's diner knew that the line between a bad situation and something much worse was about to be crossed. The morning sun still streamed through the windows. The coffee still smelled fresh. But the peaceful atmosphere of Mel's diner had shattered completely, replaced by fear and the terrible anticipation of violence about to unfold. The slap echoed through Mel's diner like a gunshot. Derek's open hand connected with Walter's face with shocking force, the sound sharp and violent in the quiet space. Walter's head snapped to the side, his reading glasses flying off his face and clattering across the checkered floor. The elderly veteran stumbled backward, his hand instinctively going to his cheek as he tried to catch his balance against the booth. For a moment, everything stopped. Complete absolute silence, then someone gasped. A woman near the window let out a small cry. Old Tom half rose from his stool, his face twisted in shock and anger. But nobody moved. Nobody rushed forward. They were all frozen in disbelief at what they'd just witnessed. Walter steadied himself against the table, his breath coming in short gasps. Not from fear, but from the shock of impact. A thin line of blood appeared at the corner of his mouth where his lip had split against his teeth. His left cheek was already turning red, the clear outline of fingers beginning to show on his weathered skin. Derek stood there, his hand still raised slightly, breathing hard. For just a second, something like surprise crossed his face as if he couldn't believe he'd actually done it. But then his expression hardened again, that ugly pride taking over. He looked around at everyone watching and laughed, that same harsh sound from before. "See?" he said to the diner at large. "That's what happens when you don't show respect. Old man thought he could talk to me however he wanted. Well, now he knows better." His two friends looked uncomfortable now, shifting their weight, not meeting anyone's eyes. This had gone way too far. One of them touched Derek's arm. "Come on, man. Let's just go. Let's get out of here," but Derek shrugged him off. "We're not going anywhere. I'm hungry. We came here to eat, remember?" He looked at Walter, who was still holding his face, trying to process what had just happened. "You gonna say anything now, Grandpa? Got any more wisdom to share?" Walter slowly straightened up. His hand trembled slightly as he touched his bleeding lip. In all his years, in all the places he'd been and things he'd seen, he'd never been struck like this. Not in civilian life, not as an old man just trying to have his breakfast. The humiliation burned hotter than the physical pain. Betty finally broke free from her shocked stillness. She rushed around the counter, her eyes filling with tears as she approached Walter. Oh my God, Mr. Hayes, are you okay? Don't move. Just sit down." She grabbed a clean napkin from a nearby table and pressed it gently to his lip. "I'm all right, Betty," Walter managed to say, though his voice was shakier than it had been before. "It's okay. It's not okay," she said, her voice breaking. She spun toward Derek, her fear momentarily overcome by anger. "What is wrong with you? He's 81 years old. You can't just hit people." Derek stepped toward her and she flinched backward. "Careful, sweetheart. You don't want to end up like him." Mel had appeared from the kitchen now, his face red with fury. He was a big man, used to handling difficult situations, but even he hesitated when he saw the look in Derek's eyes. "I've called the police," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "They're on their way. You need to leave now." "The police?" Derek laughed again. "What are they gonna do? Arrest me for teaching an old man some manners, please? By the time they get here, we'll be long gone anyway." But Derek didn't leave. Instead, he walked back to his booth and sat down, his friends reluctantly following. He leaned back, stretching his arms across the back of the seat, completely relaxed. "Actually, you know what? I changed my mind. I think we'll stay. Still hungry. And from what I can see, nobody here is going to stop me." He was right. As much as everyone in that diner wanted to do something, wanted to stand up, wanted to help Walter, fear kept them in their seats. Derek was young, aggressive, and had just shown exactly what he was capable of. Who knew what else he might do? Betty helped Walter sit back down in his booth. She kept the napkin pressed to his lip, her hands shaking. "Mr. Hayes, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. The police are coming. They'll be here soon." Walter patted her hand gently with his free one. "Not your fault, dear. Don't apologize for someone else's actions." But inside, he felt something he hadn't felt in decades. Not fear exactly, but a deep, profound sadness. Sadness that the world had become a place where someone would hit an old man over spilled coffee. Sadness that respect had become something so easily cast aside. His glasses lay broken on the floor, one lens cracked. He'd had those glasses for 5 years. His wife had helped him pick them out just months before she passed. Now they were destroyed, just like his peaceful morning, just like his dignity. People around the diner had their phones out now. Some were calling the police themselves, giving descriptions, addresses. Others were recording, documenting what had happened. A few were texting, reaching out to loved ones, telling them about the horrible thing they'd just witnessed. One older gentleman, a regular named Frank, carefully stood up and walked over to Walter's booth. He didn't say anything, just laid a hand on Walter's shoulder for a moment, a silent show of support. Then he picked up Walter's broken glasses from the floor and gently set them on the table. Derek watched all of this with a smirk. "Look at that. The old folks sticking together. That's cute." He turned to Betty. "Hey, waitress, we still gonna get that food or what? I'm starving over here." Betty's face went pale. "I'm not serving you anything." "You need to leave." I don't think so." Derek's smile vanished. "You work here, right?" "Well, I'm a customer, and the customer is always right. So bring me my eggs before I decide I'm still not satisfied with how this morning went." The threat hung in the air, unmistakable. Betty looked at Mel, who gave her a tight nod. Better to just give them what they wanted until the police arrived. No sense in escalating things further or putting anyone else at risk. Fine, she whispered, then hurried back to the kitchen. Walter sat in his booth, the napkin still pressed to his bleeding lip, his cheek throbbing where he'd been hit. Around him, the other customers sat in uncomfortable silence, avoiding eye contact with Derek, just waiting for this nightmare to end. Some of them felt guilty for not helping, some felt angry, but mostly they all just felt helpless. Derek and his friends sat there like nothing had happened, scrolling through their phones, laughing at videos, acting like they hadn't just committed assault in a room full of witnesses. The casual cruelty of it all was almost worse than the violence itself. What none of them knew, what Derek couldn't possibly have anticipated, was that Betty hadn't just called the police in Mel, while she was helping Walter, while everyone was distracted by the shock of what had happened. She'd made one more call. She'd called Walter's son, and in about 10 minutes, Derek was going to realize that slapping an 81-year-old veteran in a small Montana town was the biggest mistake he'd ever made in his life. Because Walter Hayes wasn't just any old man. He was a father, a grandfather, a decorated war hero, and most importantly, he was protected by a family that didn't take kindly to anyone hurting their own. The clock on the wall ticked forward. Derek chewed his food, oblivious. And outside, in the distance, if anyone had been listening carefully, they might have heard the faint rumble of motorcycle engines starting up one by one, heading toward Mel's Diner with a purpose that couldn't be stopped. 15 miles across town, Jack Hayes was in his garage, working on a 1972 Harley-Davidson that had been giving him trouble all week. His hands were covered in grease, and there was classic rock playing from an old radio in the corner. At 52 years old, Jack was built like his father used to be in his younger days. Broad-shouldered and strong, though his hair had gone mostly gray. The garage walls were decorated with military memorabilia, not just his own but his father's too. Photos of Walter in his army uniform looking young and serious. Medals in frames. A folded flag from Jack's own service in the Marines. This was a family that understood duty, honor, and sacrifice. Jack's phone rang, cutting through the guitar solo on the radio. He almost didn't answer, not wanting to get grease all over it, but something made him wipe his hands and pick it up. The caller ID showed Mel's Diner. That was strange. Why would they be calling him? Hello, Jack? This is Betty, from Mel's. Her voice was shaking, almost breathless. Something's happened. Your father, he's okay, but you need to come down here right now. Jack's whole body went tense. What do you mean he's okay? What happened? Someone hit him. This guy, he slapped your father across the face. His lip is bleeding and his glasses are broken, and Jack, he's sitting here and he's trying to act like he's fine. But I can see he's shaken up. The police are coming, but I thought you should know. I thought you'd want to be here. For a moment, Jack couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. The words didn't make sense. Someone hit his father? His 81-year-old father? The man who'd survived a war, who'd raised him and his sisters with patience and love, who still went to the VFW every month to see his old friends? Is he hurt? Does he need an ambulance? Jack's voice was deadly calm now, that Marine training kicking in even after all these years. No ambulance. He's conscious, he's talking. But Jack, the guy who did it, is still here. He's sitting in the diner like nothing happened, and your dad is just sitting there with a bloody lip, and I don't know what to do. I'm on my way. Jack hung up without saying goodbye. His hands, which had been steady while working on the motorcycle, were shaking now. Not from fear, from rage. His father. Someone had put their hands on his father. Jack took a deep breath, forcing himself to think clearly. He needed to be smart about this. He scrolled through his contacts and found the number for Danny, the president of his motorcycle club. Jack had been riding with the local Hells Angels chapter for 15 years now, ever since he'd left the Marines. It was the brotherhood he'd needed after military life. Men who understood loyalty and had each other's backs no matter what. Danny answered on the second ring. What's up, brother? Danny, I need the crew. Right now. Someone just attacked my dad at Mel's Diner. He's still there. There was a brief pause, then Danny's voice came back, hard as steel. Say no more. Where are you? I'm at home. I can be at the clubhouse in 5 minutes. Don't bother. Head straight to the diner. I'll make the calls. We'll meet you there. How many guys we talking about? Betty said it was one guy who hit him, but he might have friends with him. Doesn't matter. We'll bring everyone available. Nobody touches one of our brother's family, nobody. Thanks, Danny. Don't thank me. This is what we do. Your dad's a veteran, right? Korea? Yeah. Then this is personal for all of us. See you in 10. Jack hung up and immediately called his father's number. It rang 4 times before Walter answered, his voice sounding tired and older than Jack had ever heard it. Hello, son. Dad, are you okay? Betty just called me. I'm coming right now. Jack, I'm fine. It's not that bad. You don't need to make a fuss. But Jack could hear it in his voice, that shake, that hint of something his father never showed. Vulnerability, maybe even fear. Someone hit you, Dad. That's not fine. That's assault. Did you get a good look at him? Hard to miss him. Tall kid covered in tattoos thinks he owns the world. He's still here, actually, eating breakfast like he didn't just commit a crime. There was something in Walter's tone now, a bitterness that Jack had never heard before. He's still there? Good. That makes this easier. Dad, just sit tight. Don't engage with him. Don't say anything else. I'm bringing some friends. Jack. Walter's voice took on that fatherly warning tone. Don't do anything stupid. The police are coming. Let them handle it. I'm not going to do anything stupid, Dad, I promise. But I'm not letting this go either. This guy needs to understand what he's done, who he's messed with. I don't want you getting in trouble because of me. Dad, you're my father. You took care of me my whole life. You taught me right from wrong. You showed me what it means to be a man, to stand up for what's right. You think I'm going to sit at home while the person who hurt you is eating eggs 10 miles away? Not a chance. Walter was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was softer. You're a good son, Jack. I learned from the best. I'll be there soon. Love you, Dad. Love you too, son. Jack hung up and grabbed his leather vest from where it hung by the garage door. The vest was worn and weathered, covered in patches that told the story of his years with the club. But the patch he was most proud of was the small one on the front over his heart. It was an American flag with veteran written underneath. He'd earned that patch just like his father had earned his own honors all those years ago. He strapped on his helmet and threw his leg over his Harley. The engine roared to life with a thunder that echoed through the quiet neighborhood. Usually that sound brought him peace, but not today. Today it was a war cry. As he pulled out of his driveway, his phone started buzzing with text messages. The brothers were responding to Danny's call. They were coming. All of them. On my way. I'm 10 minutes out. Nobody messes with our veterans. See you there, brother. Message after message, the brotherhood rallying like they always did when one of their own needed them. And Walter was one of their own. Maybe not a member of the club, but the father of a brother, which meant he was protected. Sacred. Jack rode hard through town, his mind racing. He kept seeing images of his father, young and strong in those old photos, then older, teaching Jack to ride a bike, to throw a baseball, to be honest and kind. He thought about all the times his dad had been there for him, through his troubled teenage years, through his deployment overseas, through his divorce, and now someone had hit him, had humiliated him in public, had made him bleed. The rage that burned in Jack's chest wasn't just anger. It was righteous fury, the kind that comes from seeing someone you love hurt by someone who had no right, no reason, no justification. In the distance, he could hear other engines now. His brothers converging on Mel's diner from different parts of town. They'd all dropped whatever they were doing, left work, left home, because that's what brotherhood meant. When one called, they all answered. Jack glanced at the speedometer. He was going faster than he should, but he didn't care. His father needed him, and behind him, growing louder with each passing second, came the rumble of a dozen more motorcycles. Derek had made a terrible mistake. He'd thought he could intimidate an old man and walk away. He'd thought his youth and his anger made him untouchable. But he'd forgotten something important about small towns like this one. Everyone's connected. Everyone's family. And when you hurt one person, you answer to all of them. The diner was just ahead now. Jack could see it through the morning sun, looking peaceful and normal from the outside. But inside, he knew his father was sitting there with a bloody lip and broken glasses, waiting. Not for much longer. Jack and his brothers were coming. And justice, one way or another, was about to be served. The rumble started as a distant sound like thunder on the horizon. At first, nobody in Mel's diner really noticed it. Derek was finishing his eggs, still acting like he owned the place. His two friends sat quietly, occasionally glancing at Walter's booth, looking increasingly uncomfortable with the whole situation. Walter sat with his arms folded, the napkin still dabbing at his split lip. Betty hovered nearby, checking on him every few minutes, bringing him fresh ice wrapped in a clean towel. The other customers remained quiet. Some had left, but others stayed, not wanting to abandon the old veteran even though they felt helpless to do anything more than witness. Then the rumble got louder. And louder. One of Derek's friends looked toward the window, his eyes widening. Derek? You hear that? Derek waved him off. Hear what? Stop being paranoid, but now everyone could hear it. The deep, unmistakable roar of motorcycle engines. Not just one or two. Many. The sound grew until it seemed to shake the very walls of the diner, rattling the windows in their frames, making the silverware vibrate on the tables. People started moving toward the windows to look out. What they saw made several of them gasp. Motorcycles were pulling into the parking lot. Big chrome Harley-Davidsons, their engines thundering like a storm. One after another they came, forming a line that stretched across the entire front of the diner. The riders wore leather vests, and even from inside you could see the patches. The Death Head logo. The rockers that read Hell's Angels and Montana. Derek's face went pale. His fork clattered onto his plate. "Oh no," one of his friends whispered. "Derek, we need to go." "We need to go right now." But it was too late for that. The parking lot was blocked. There had to be at least 12 motorcycles out there, maybe more. And they'd positioned themselves in a way that made it clear nobody was leaving unless they said so. The engines cut off one by one, leaving a ringing silence that somehow felt louder than the noise had been. 12 men dismounted from their bikes, removing their helmets in synchronized movements that spoke of military precision. They were all different ages, from their 30s to their 60s, but they carried themselves the same way. Confident, purposeful, dangerous when they needed to be. Walter's head lifted, his eyes moving to the window. A small smile crossed his face despite the pain, despite the dried blood on his chin. He knew what was happening. He knew who was coming. The lead biker was Jack Hayes. Even through the window you could see the resemblance to Walter, the same strong jaw, the same set to his shoulders. He stood for a moment surveying the diner, his hand resting on his belt. Then he nodded to the others, and as one they started walking toward the entrance. Betty's eyes filled with tears, but this time they were tears of relief. "Mr. Hayes, I think your son is here." "I can see that," Walter said quietly, and there was pride in his voice mixed with a little worry. He knew his son. He knew what Jack was capable of when he was angry. Derek had backed away from his booth now, his bravado completely gone. He looked at his friends, both of whom had stood up. "I thought you said his son was just some guy," he hissed. "I didn't know." One of them shot back. "You didn't tell us you were going to hit somebody." The door opened and Jack walked in first. He was a big man, 6'2", built solid from years of physical work and military training. His leather vest hung open over a black t-shirt, and his boots echoed on the diner floor as he walked. His eyes scanned the room quickly, professionally, finding his father first. When he saw Walter sitting there with the ice pack against his face, his jaw clenched so hard you could see the muscle jump. But he didn't rush over, not yet. He had something else to take care of first. Behind Jack, his brothers filed in, spreading out across the diner in a practiced formation. They didn't say anything. They didn't have to. Their presence spoke volumes. The patches on their vests, the way they moved, the calm intensity on their faces, it all sent one very clear message. You don't mess with our family. The other customers in the diner pressed themselves back against the walls, but not out of fear. They could sense this wasn't about them. This was about the young man who'd committed an act of violence and thought he'd get away with it. Jack's eyes found Derek. It wasn't hard. Derek was the only one in the place who looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. Jack started walking toward him, his steps slow and measured. The other bikers adjusted their positions, creating a wall between Derek and the door. "You the one who hit my father?" Jack's voice was calm, conversational almost, but there was something underneath it, like ice over deep water. Derek tried to recover some of his earlier confidence, but his voice came out shaky. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Really?" "Because my father is sitting over there with a split lip and broken glasses, and about 15 people in this diner saw you slap him." So I'm going to ask you again, are you the one who hit my father? One of Derek's friends took a step toward the back door. Immediately, two of the bikers moved to block it. The friend froze, then slowly backed up against the wall, hands raised slightly. Message received. Jack hadn't even glanced at them. His eyes were locked on Derek. See, here's the thing. That man over there, he's 81 years old. He's a Korean War veteran. He earned a Purple Heart. He spent 3 years of his life in hell so people like you could live in freedom. And you thought you could just walk in here and assault him? Over spilled coffee? It wasn't like that. Derek started, but his voice trailed off when he saw the look on Jack's face. Then what was it like? Explain it to me. Help me understand what could possibly justify putting your hands on an old man. Jack's voice was getting quieter, which somehow made it more frightening. The diner was completely silent now. Even Mel had stopped moving. Everyone was watching this confrontation, this moment where justice was being weighed in a way that had nothing to do with police or courts. Danny, the club president, stepped up beside Jack. He was older, probably in his early 60s, with a gray beard and weathered face. He looked at Derek with something like disgust. You know, we got veterans in our club. Good men who served their country. We got a code. We protect our own, and we protect those who protected us. This man, he gestured toward Walter. He's both. Another biker spoke up, younger, maybe 40. I did 2 tours in Afghanistan. You know what we were taught? Honor, respect, integrity. You clearly missed that lesson. Derek's back was against the booth now. He looked left and right, but there was nowhere to go. His friends had inched away from him, clearly not wanting to be associated with whatever was about to happen. Jack took another step closer. You got 2 choices here. Actually, no. You got no choices. You're going to walk over to my father and you're going to apologize. A real apology. Not because you're scared, though I can see you are, but because it's the right thing to do. And then you're going to sit here and wait for the police to arrive and take you away. And if I don't? Derek's voice was barely a whisper. Jack smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Then we're going to have a very different kind of conversation. The kind that happens outside. Just you and me. No weapons, no tricks. Just an old-fashioned lesson in respect. Your choice. Derek looked around at the ring of bikers surrounding him. 12 men who'd dropped everything to come here. 12 men who clearly would back Jack no matter what he decided to do. 12 men who had no sympathy for someone who'd assault an elderly veteran. The weight of his situation finally seemed to sink in. Derek's shoulders slumped. All the anger, all the bravado, all the false confidence that had led him to that terrible decision was gone now, replaced by the reality of consequences. I'll apologize, he mumbled. What was that? Danny said. Speak up. I said I'll apologize. Louder this time, with a tremor in his voice. Jack stepped aside, gesturing toward Walter's booth. Then do it now. As Derek started his slow walk across the diner floor, every eye following him, Walter sat up a little straighter. His son had come for him. His son and his brothers. The pain in his face seemed less important now, overshadowed by the knowledge that he was loved, protected, valued. The morning sun continued to stream through the windows, catching the chrome on the motorcycles outside. Mel's diner had never seen anything like this, and neither had Derek, who was about to learn that actions have consequences, and some people, especially those who've served their country, are never truly alone. Derek walked across that diner floor like a man heading to his own execution. Each step seemed to take forever. His face had gone from red with anger to white with fear, and his hands trembled at his sides. Behind him, Jack followed at a distance, not rushing him, but making sure he didn't change his mind. The other bikers maintained their positions around the diner, a silent wall of leather and steel. Some of them had their arms crossed. Others stood with hands in their pockets. But every single one of them watched Derek with eyes that had seen combat, violence, and men far tougher than this scared kid trying to act hard. Walter watched him approach. The old veteran's face was still swollen. The ice pack had helped a bit, but the mark of Derek's hand was clear on his cheek. His broken glasses sat on the table beside his cold coffee. He didn't stand up. He didn't need to. He simply sat there with the dignity that comes from a lifetime of doing the right thing, waiting. Derek stopped a few feet from the booth. He couldn't seem to make himself get any closer. His mouth opened and closed a few times, but no words came out. "Go on," Jack said from behind him. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried authority. "Say what you need to say." Derek swallowed hard. When he finally spoke, his voice cracked. "I'm sorry. For hitting you. I shouldn't have done that." Walter looked at him for a long moment. Then, in that quiet voice that had gotten him in trouble in the first place, he said, "Why did you do it?" The question seemed to throw Derek off balance. He'd expected to apologize and be done, but now he had to explain himself in front of everyone. "I don't know. I was angry. You told me to watch where I was going, and I lost it." "You lost it?" Walter repeated, not as a question, but as if he was considering the words, over being asked to be more careful. Derek nodded miserably. One of the bikers, a man with gray in his beard and scars on his hands, spoke up. "You know what I think? I think you're used to pushing people around, making yourself feel big by making others feel small. Am I right?" Derek didn't answer, but his silence said everything. Jack moved closer, standing beside his father's booth now. "Let me tell you something about this man. When he was 19 years old, younger than you are now, he got drafted, sent to Korea. You know what he did there? He carried wounded soldiers out of combat zones, under fire, while people were shooting at him. He saved lives while risking his own." Walter shifted uncomfortably. "Jack, that was a long time ago." "Doesn't matter, Dad, it matters today." Jack turned back to Derek. "He came home with medals. But more than that, he came home with honor. He raised a family, worked hard every day of his life, treated people with respect. And you thought you could just hit him? Like he's nothing? Like his life and service don't matter?" Tears were starting to form in Derek's eyes now. Not fake tears meant to manipulate, but real ones, born from shame and the crushing weight of understanding exactly what he'd done. Danny stepped forward. "You know what respect means? Real respect. It means understanding that every person has a story, has value. That old man you hit, he's somebody's father, somebody's grandfather. He's a hero to people who understand what sacrifice means, and you put your hands on him over coffee." "I'm sorry," Derek said again, and this time his voice broke completely. "I'm really sorry. I don't know what I was thinking." "You weren't thinking," another biker said. "That's the problem. You were acting, trying to be tough, trying to prove something. Well, you proved it all right. You proved you're the kind of person who hits old men when they can't fight back." Walter finally spoke, his voice tired but firm. "Do you know why I asked you to watch where you were going?" Derek looked up at him, confused by the question. "What?" "I asked you a question. Do you know why I said that to you?" Because I bumped your table. Partly, but also because that's what civilized people do. When we make a mistake, even a small one, we acknowledge it. We show consideration for others. I wasn't trying to disrespect you. I was trying to teach you a basic lesson about living in society with other people." The words hit harder than any physical blow could have. You could see it in Derek's face, the realization of just how badly he'd misread the situation, how his pride and anger had turned a simple moment into a crime. Jack crossed his arms. "Now here's what's going to happen. You're going to sit down over there." He pointed to an empty booth near the door. "And you're going to wait for the police. When they get here, you're going to cooperate fully. You're not going to make excuses or try to lie your way out of this. You're going to take responsibility for what you did." "Okay," Derek whispered. "And one more thing," Danny added. "If we ever hear about you putting your hands on anyone else, especially another veteran or elderly person, we'll find you. And next time we won't be asking for apologies. We clear?" Derek nodded frantically. "Yes, sir. I understand. I promise I'll never do anything like this again." "You better hope that's true," Jack said. He turned to Derek's two friends who were still pressed against the wall. "That goes for you two as well. You see your friend here heading down a bad path, you stop him. You don't just stand there and watch, because silence makes you just as guilty." Both of them nodded quickly. One of them spoke up, his voice shaking. "We tried to get him to leave. Before it happened. We told him to let it go." "Not hard enough," Jack replied, "because it still happened. Remember that." The sound of sirens finally broke through the tension. Police cars were pulling up outside, their red and blue lights flashing across the diner windows. Derek moved to the booth Jack had indicated and sat down heavily, his head in his hands. Two officers entered the diner, and immediately their eyes went wide at the scene. A dozen Hells Angels bikers, an injured elderly man, and a room full of witnesses all pointing at Derek, the senior officer. A man named Tom Rodriguez, who'd been on the force for 20 years, took in the situation quickly. He knew Jack and some of the other bikers. This was a small town. Everyone knew everyone. Somebody want to tell me what happened here? Rodriguez asked, though his eyes had already found Walter's swollen face. Betty stepped forward, her voice steady now. That man, she pointed at Derek, assaulted Mr. Hayes, slapped him across the face hard enough to split his lip and break his glasses. I saw it happen. So did everyone else in here. Rodriguez walked over to Walter's booth, his expression softening. Mr. Hayes, you okay? You need medical attention? Walter shook his head. I'm all right, officer. Just want to make sure that young man is charged for what he did. Oh, he will be. Assault on an elderly person is a serious charge, especially a veteran. Rodriguez looked at Jack. I'm assuming you're the son. Yes, sir. Got here about 10 minutes ago. We haven't touched him. He's all yours. Rodriguez seemed relieved at that. He turned to his partner. Mike, read him his rights and get him out of here. As Derek was being handcuffed, he looked back at Walter one more time. I really am sorry, he said, and this time it sounded genuine. Walter nodded slowly. I believe you are. I hope you learn from this. I hope you become a better person. Even now, even after everything the old veteran was trying to teach, trying to guide. It was in his nature. It was who he'd always been. Derek was led out to the police car, his head down, his hands cuffed behind his back. His two friends were questioned and told they'd likely have to give statements but weren't being arrested, since they hadn't participated in the assault. As the police car drove away with Derek in the back seat, the tension in Mel's diner finally broke. People started moving again, talking in low voices, processing what they'd just witnessed. Jack sat down across from his father, reaching out to gently examine the injury. Dad, we should really get you checked out at the hospital. I'm fine, son. Just a split lip. I've had worse, I know you have. But humor me anyway. Walter smiled slightly, wincing at the pain it caused. You didn't have to bring the whole club, you know? Yes, I did. Because you're worth it. Because someone needed to show that punk that actions have consequences. And because, Jack's voice got softer, because you're my dad, and nobody hurts you without answering for it. Around them, the other bikers started to relax. Some sat down at the counter. Mel came out from behind it, shaking hands with Jack, with Danny, with the others. Breakfast is on the house for all of you, he announced. Anyone who stands up for Walter Hayes is welcome here anytime. A few of the bikers smiled. One of them called out, Hope you got enough eggs for all of us, Mel. Laughter rippled through the diner, breaking the last of the tension. Life was returning to normal, or as normal as it could be after a morning like this one. But everyone there knew they'd witnessed something important. Not just the arrest of someone who'd committed a crime, but a display of what community means, what family means, what it means to stand up for those who can't always stand up for themselves. And Derek, sitting in that police car heading to the station, was learning the hardest lesson of his young life, that respect isn't demanded, it's earned. And that sometimes, justice wears a leather vest and rides a Harley Davidson. The police station was cold and sterile, nothing like the warm chaos of Mel's diner. Derek sat in an interrogation room, the fluorescent lights humming overhead. His hands no longer cuffed but resting on a metal table. Officer Rodriguez sat across from him, a folder open in front of him containing witness statements from nearly everyone who'd been in the diner that morning. Do you understand the charges against you? Rodriguez asked, his pen tapping against the folder. Derek nodded, not meeting the officer's eyes. Assault on an elderly person, that's right. It's a felony in Montana. You're looking at potential prison time, not just a fine or probation. Do you understand that? Yes, sir. Derek's voice was barely above a whisper. Rodriguez leaned back in his chair, studying the young man in front of him. He'd seen plenty of people in this room over the years. Some were hardened criminals who didn't care. Others were good people who'd made one terrible mistake. He was trying to figure out which category Derek fell into. Tell me something, Rodriguez said. What were you thinking? And I don't want excuses. I want the truth. Derek was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his words came out halting, uncertain. I wasn't thinking. I was angry all the time. At everything. My girlfriend left me last month. I lost my job 2 weeks ago. I've been staying with those guys you saw sleeping on a couch, and I felt like the whole world was against me. So you took it out on an 81-year-old man who asked you to watch where you were going. Put that way, it sounded even worse than it had felt in the moment. Derek's eyes filled with tears again. I know how it sounds. I know what I did was wrong. When his son showed up with all those guys, when they were talking about who he was, what he'd done, I realized I didn't even see him as a person. I just saw someone who I thought was disrespecting me. But he wasn't disrespecting you. He was being polite. I know that now. Derek put his head in his hands. I've messed up my whole life, haven't I? Rodriguez didn't answer that directly. What you did was serious. Very serious. But what happens next depends a lot on you. How you handle this. Whether you take responsibility or try to blame everyone else. I'm not going to blame anyone else. This was all me. I wish I could take it back. I wish I could go back to this morning and just apologize for bumping his table and leave. You can't take it back, but you can face it. You can make it right as much as possible anyway. Meanwhile, back at the diner, things had settled down considerably. Most of the regular customers had left, their appetites and nerves unsettled by the morning's events. But the bikers remained, and so did Walter, at Jack's insistence. Danny was telling a story about his time in Vietnam, trying to lighten the mood. A few of the younger bikers were listening intently, asking questions. Walter found himself joining in, sharing his own memories from Korea, things he didn't talk about often. The cold was the worst part, Walter said, his voice distant with memory. People don't realize how cold Korea gets in winter. We'd wake up with ice in our canteens. Your weapon would freeze up if you weren't careful. How old were you when you shipped out? One of the younger bikers asked. 19. Just a kid, really. Thought I knew everything. The army taught me different pretty quick. Jack listened to his father talk, seeing a side of him that didn't come out often. Walter didn't like to talk about the war much. He'd always said that the real heroes were the ones who didn't come home. But today, maybe because of what had happened, maybe because he was surrounded by men who understood service and sacrifice, he was opening up. Betty came over with fresh coffee, refilling cups. Mr. Hayes, I just want to say again how sorry I am about what happened. You've been coming here for years and nothing like this has ever happened before. Betty, you have nothing to apologize for. You called the police. You called Jack, you did everything right. Walter patted her hand gently. And you make the best coffee in town, which is why I keep coming back. She smiled through tears. Your meals are free from now on, Mel insisted. And I'm going to personally make sure nobody bothers you ever again. I appreciate that, dear. I really do. The door opened and Officer Rodriguez walked in. Everyone turned to look at him. He headed straight for Walter's booth. Mr. Hayes, I need to ask you some questions for my report. Are you up for that? Of course, officer. Rodriguez pulled out a notepad. Walk me through what happened from the beginning. Walter recounted the events calmly, without embellishment. He described Derek bumping the table, the spilled coffee, the request to be more careful. Then the escalation, the mocking, and finally the slap. As he spoke, his hand unconsciously went to his still swollen cheek. Did he threaten you verbally before he hit you? Rodriguez asked. He was aggressive, confrontational. But I don't remember specific threats. It happened very quickly. And you didn't do anything to provoke the attack? No insults, no aggressive behavior on your part? No, sir. I just asked him to watch where he was going. That was all. Rodriguez finished his notes and closed his notebook. Mr. Hayes, the young man in custody is cooperating fully. He's admitted to the assault and isn't trying to make excuses. He seems genuinely remorseful. Jack spoke up. He should be remorseful. He assaulted an elderly veteran. I know. And he'll face consequences for that. But I wanted you to know, Mr. Hayes, that he's asked if he could apologize to you again. Properly. Says what he said at the diner wasn't enough. Walter looked surprised. He wants to apologize again? He does. Now you're under no obligation to see him or hear him out. That's completely your choice. But I wanted to extend the offer. The diner went quiet. Everyone was looking at Walter, waiting to see what he'd say. Jack looked like he wanted to object, but he held his tongue. This was his father's decision. Walter thought about it for a long moment. He thought about the young man's face, the fear and shame in his eyes when the bikers had confronted him. He thought about his own past, his own mistakes when he was young. Not the same kind of mistakes, certainly, but everyone stumbles sometime. Does he understand that seeing me won't affect his charges? That I'm still pressing charges? He does. He said he deserves whatever punishment comes. He just wants you to know he's truly sorry. Walter nodded slowly. Then yes, I'll hear what he has to say. Jack leaned forward. Dad, are you sure? You don't owe him anything. I know I don't, but maybe he needs to say it, and maybe I need to hear it. Not for me, but for him, so he can start making this right. Rodriguez looked impressed. That's very generous of you, Mr. Hayes. I'll arrange it. Would you be willing to come down to the station in about an hour? I'll bring him, Jack said firmly, and I'm staying with him during it. That's fine. I'll be there too. It'll all be supervised and official. After Rodriguez left, Danny spoke up. Walter, you're a better man than most. I don't know if I could face someone who hit me so soon after. Maybe I'm just old enough to know that holding on to anger doesn't help anyone. That boy's got a long road ahead of him. If I can help him start down it a little straighter, maybe something good can come from this morning after all. One of the other bikers shook his head in admiration. That's the difference between men who've seen real combat and punks who just act tough. You guys know what real strength looks like. It's not about hitting people. It's about controlling yourself. About having principles. It's about remembering that everyone deserves a chance to be better than their worst moment. Walter added quietly, I've lived 81 years. I've seen a lot of good people do bad things when they're hurting or scared or angry. Doesn't excuse it. But understanding it, that's important too. An hour later, Walter and Jack walked into the police station together. Walter had cleaned up. His lip was no longer bleeding, though the bruise on his cheek had darkened to a deep purple. Jack stayed close to his side, protective but respectful of his father's decision. They were led to a room with a table and chairs, more comfortable than an interrogation room but still official. Rodriguez was there, and after a few minutes, Derek was brought in. He looked smaller somehow, defeated. His eyes were red from crying. When he saw Walter's bruised face up close under the harsh fluorescent lights, Derek's face crumpled. Oh God, I did that to you. Walter gestured to a chair. Sit down, son. Derek sat, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Derek took a shaky breath and began. Mr. Hayes, I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't expect you to understand. But I need to say this. What I did to you was wrong. It was cowardly and cruel, and there's no excuse for it. He paused, struggling with his emotions. When your son and his friends showed up, when they told me who you were, what you'd done, I realized I didn't even see you as a real person in that moment. I was so wrapped up in my own anger, my own problems, that I treated you like you were nothing. But you're not nothing. You're somebody's father. You're a veteran who served our country. You're a man who deserves respect. Tears were flowing freely down Derek's face now. I'm 27 years old, and I've wasted most of my life being angry at the world. Today I hit an 81-year-old man over spilled coffee. That's who I've become, and I hate it. I hate myself for it. Walter listened quietly, his expression neutral but not unkind. Derek continued, his voice breaking. I know saying sorry doesn't fix anything. The next morning, Walter woke up with his face still sore and bruised. The purple mark on his cheek had spread, and his lip was swollen. He looked at himself in the bathroom mirror and shook his head. 81 years old, and here he was looking like he'd been in a bar fight. But as he made his way to the kitchen to start his coffee, he heard something outside. The rumble of motorcycle engines. He looked out the window and smiled despite the pain it caused. Jack's truck was in the driveway, and behind it were at least 8 motorcycles. The bikers from yesterday, plus a few more. They were setting up folding chairs on his front lawn, and someone was carrying what looked like breakfast containers from Mel's Diner. Walter opened his front door to find Danny standing there with a grin on his weathered face. Morning, Walter. Hope you don't mind some company. We figured you shouldn't be alone today, and Mel insisted on sending breakfast. Says you're not allowed to miss your eggs and coffee just because of what happened. Walter felt his throat tighten with emotion. You didn't have to do this. Yeah, we did. Danny's expression grew serious. You're Jack's father. That makes you family, and we take care of family. Within minutes, Walter's quiet home was filled with the sounds of laughter and conversation. The bikers had brought enough breakfast for an army: scrambled eggs, bacon, toast, hash browns, and gallons of coffee. They spread out across his living room and front porch, making themselves comfortable. Jack appeared at his father's side. I know you like your quiet mornings, Dad. But after yesterday, I wanted to make sure you knew you weren't alone. I never thought I was alone, son. But this, Walter gestured at the gathering, This is special. Thank you. As they ate, the stories started flowing, veterans sharing their experiences. The brotherhood that forms between those who've served regardless of which war or which branch. Walter found himself talking more about Korea than he had in years, and the younger men listened with respect and genuine interest. One of the bikers, a man named Tommy who'd served in Iraq, spoke up. "Mr. Hayes, what you did yesterday, showing that kid compassion even after what he did to you, that takes a kind of courage most people don't have." "It's not courage," Walter said quietly. "It's just understanding that we're all human. We all make mistakes. But not everyone has the heart to forgive like that," another biker added. "Especially not right after being hurt." Walter sipped his coffee, thinking about how to explain it. "When I was in Korea, I saw men do terrible things because they were scared or angry or traumatized. I saw good men become hard and bitter, and I saw other men, despite everything, hold on to their humanity. Those were the ones I tried to be like. Those were the ones who made it home and built good lives." He paused, looking around at the men gathered in his home. "That boy yesterday, Derek, he's at a crossroads. He can let anger destroy him, or he can choose to be better. I've lived too long to waste energy on hate. Life's too precious for that." Danny nodded thoughtfully. "That's wisdom right there. The young guys need to hear that. Hell, all of us need to hear that." The morning stretched into afternoon. Neighbors came by, having heard what happened, bringing food and well wishes. Old Tom from the diner showed up with his wife, both of them wanting to check on Walter. Betty came by on her lunch break with a fresh apple pie. "The whole town's talking about what happened," she said as she set the pie on Walter's kitchen counter. "And not just about the assault. They're talking about how you handled it, how you showed that young man mercy." "I just treated him like a human being," Walter replied. "That's more than most would do. You're a good man, Mr. Hayes. Always have been." By mid-afternoon, the gathering had turned into an impromptu neighborhood party. Someone had brought a guitar and music filled the air. Children from nearby houses came over to see the motorcycles, and the bikers patiently showed them the bikes, answering questions, letting them sit on the seats while their parents watched. Jack stood on the porch next to his father, watching it all. "You know, Dad, I was so angry yesterday. When Betty called and told me what happened, all I could think about was making that guy pay. I know you were. I could see it in your eyes. But watching you today, seeing how you handled everything, I realized something. You're tougher than all of us put together, not because you can fight, but because you choose not to when you don't have to." Walter put his hand on his son's shoulder. "You're a good man, Jack. You stood up for me when I needed you. You brought your brothers to make sure I was safe. That's what family does. But you also held back when I asked you to. That's what wise men do. I learned from the best." Jack's voice was thick with emotion. As the sun started to set, casting golden light across the yard, Danny called for everyone's attention. The conversations died down and all eyes turned to him. "I want to say something," Danny announced. "Yesterday we witnessed an act of violence against a good man, a veteran, someone who deserves our respect and protection. But we also witnessed something else. We saw how a real man handles adversity, how he responds to cruelty with dignity, how he teaches even in his darkest moments." He looked at Walter. "Walter Hayes, you reminded us all why we do what we do, why we protect our communities, why we honor our veterans, not with violence, though we're ready for that when necessary, but with principle, with honor, with the kind of strength that comes from character, not muscle." The bikers started to applaud, and soon everyone was clapping. Walter's face flushed, uncomfortable with the attention but grateful for the sentiment. "And that's why," Danny continued, "we're making it official. Walter, you're now an honorary member of our club. We don't give this honor lightly, but you've earned it. You're one of us." Tommy stepped forward holding a leather vest similar to the ones the bikers wore but without all the patches. On the back it simply read "Honorary Member" with the club's emblem. On the front was a patch that said "Veteran Korea." Walter stood up slowly, his eyes wide. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," Jack said, his voice full of pride. "Just accept it. Let us honor you the way you deserve." They helped Walter into the vest, and the applause grew louder. Neighbors were cheering, cameras were flashing, and in that moment Walter felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Not just loved, not just protected, but truly seen, recognized for who he was and what he'd lived through. That evening, after everyone had left and it was just Walter and Jack sitting on the porch in the gathering darkness, They sat in comfortable silence. The vest hung on a coat rack by the door, a symbol of brotherhood and respect. "You know what I've learned in my 81 years?" Walter finally said. "What's that, Dad?" "That the bonds we form with each other, the way we show up for one another, that's what matters. That's what lasts. Money comes and goes. Health fades. But the love of family and friends, the respect of good people, that's the real treasure." Jack nodded, watching the stars begin to appear in the darkening sky. "Yesterday was one of the worst days, seeing you hurt like that. But look at what came from it. Look at today. All these people showing they care. Derek learning a lesson that might change his life. You and your brothers showing what real strength looks like." Walter shook his head in wonder. "Sometimes the worst moments teach us the most important lessons. Do you think Derek will really change?" "I don't know, I hope so. But that's up to him. All I can do is hope that what I said to him sticks with him. That when he's tempted to lash out in anger again, he remembers an old man who chose kindness instead of vengeance." They sat there for a while longer, father and son, veteran and veteran, two men who understood sacrifice and service. The night grew darker, but the porch light kept the shadows at bay. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. A car drove by slowly. Life went on, as it always does. 3 months later, Jack got a letter at the clubhouse. It was from Derek, written from the county jail where he was serving his sentence. The handwriting was careful, deliberate. "Dear Jack and Mr. Hayes, I know I have no right to write to you, but I wanted you to know that I think about what happened every day. More importantly, I think about what Mr. Hayes said to me, about being better, about making different choices. I've been taking classes here, working on my GED. I've been going to anger management and therapy. I'm not the same person I was that morning at the diner. I'll never be that person again. When I get out in 4 months, I'm going to prove that Mr. Hayes was right to show me mercy. I'm going to spend the rest of my life being the kind of man who helps people instead of hurting them. I know sorry isn't enough. It'll never be enough. But I'm going to try to make my life mean something. That's the best apology I can give. Thank you for believing I could be better, even when I didn't believe it myself. Derek." Jack showed the letter to his father the next time he visited. Walter read it slowly, his reading glasses perched on his nose, a small smile playing at his lips. "Good," he said simply. "That's very good. Think he'll stick to it? I think he's got a chance. And sometimes that's all anyone needs." Walter folded the letter carefully and handed it back to his son. "You know, Jack, when I woke up that Tuesday morning, I thought it was just going to be another ordinary day. Coffee and eggs at Mel's, reading the paper, coming home to work in the garden. It turned out to be anything but ordinary.